What do you expect on Sunday?
First, Tony Romo. I want you to understand, I am now perfectly happy with Tony Romo playing at Philadelphia on Sunday. In fact, I'm ecstatic about it because I want Dak to play a half. I want him to play the whole first half, and I want Tony Romo to play the whole second half because now he can be no threat to Dak Prescott after Dak Prescott made Jerry Jones eat all of his words, and he shut up Jerry Jones with 2 straight big stage dominant national TV performances against division-leading teams with pretty to very good defenses. And I'm talking about Tampa Bay on Sunday night, followed by Detroit on Monday night. Way to go, Dak Prescott. Game over for Tony Romo.
Detroit's defense isn't very good.
You know what? I think they're better than you give them credit for. I think they've hung in all year. They were without Darius Slay, obviously, on Monday night, but I think they're pretty good, and we'll talk about them in just a minute.
Okay.
That's our second topic of the day. But my point is, Tony Romo is now clearly the backup quarterback. He's the emergency quarterback. He's the just-in-case quarterback. And to me, he needs a little game action because we have not seen Tony Romo in a football game for a year back to Thanksgiving and 5 weeks. So it's been a year and 5 weeks since we saw Tony Romo in a regular season game. Obviously, he played none in the preseason except he started game 3 of the preseason, the dress rehearsal game at Seattle, and we know he lasted 3 plays. And Cliff Averill came blowing up his backside and knocked Tony Romo over and crushed him and doubled him over. And obviously, Tony Romo injured his back, and that was the last we saw of him for this year. But I want him to see a little game action. It shocked me that Jerry Jones, after he talked on and dropped hint after hint about how he wanted Tony Romo to get back in that starting quarterback saddle for that Super Bowl run, after Monday night, when he got shut up and shut down, Jerry Jones, after that game, he said, why should we even risk playing Tony Romo at Philadelphia? Well, Jerry remembers what happened last year, game 2 at Philadelphia. If we could just remind everybody what happened there. Tony Romo, Jordan Hicks, cheap shot. Yeah, it was a cheap shot. Yeah, it was a cheap shot, but it ended Tony's year, at least until he came back for the Miami game and then the Carolina. Ooh, God, that's a bad look, right, at Philadelphia. And
I know your pain, Tony.
Yeah, and I used to know Michael Irvin's pain because his career also ended on turf in Philadelphia on a very cold November day. I don't know if we have this one also. Michael Irvin, do we have this one? Or is this,
there it is right there.
There it is. Here we go. Michael Irvin, number 88, greatest receiver ever. Ooh, that's wicked. I'll see it. Just the
I think
screen
Bob Hayes
went black,
is the
right? That's just the end of his career.
I think Bob Hayes is
the greatest
Cowboy
Cowboy receiver. but Jerry Jones is well aware that it's a bad blood rivalry. Bad things have happened to the Dallas Cowboys in Philadelphia. You know what? I'm going to hang on to a quote that I read from Scott Linehan, the current offensive coordinator, who said a couple days ago, if you spend a bunch of time concerned about things that could happen negatively in a football game, you get consumed by that. And you know and I know you can't play football not to lose, and you can't play football not to get hurt.
Nope.
You just have to go play football. So I'm ready to give it up to the injury gods and just say, let the chips fall. I want to see Dak for a half. Now, there's a big concern at left tackle because the stud, the all-pro, cannot go. And I think he's going to be ready for the playoffs, but he's got a slightly sprained knee. Thanks to what was a cheap shot. But that's a whole other issue with the Lions. But
why is it always cheap shots on your guys?
Because it was, but I'm going to let it go. But now somebody named Emmett Cleary is supposed to start at left tackle. He's now on his 6th NFL team out of Boston College, undrafted. So that's what you got, unless you move Doug Free from right tackle to left tackle, and Free can be no bargain on some occasions. So I think Jason Garrett needs to play it by ear. Just see, can the protection hold up relatively well? If it can't, maybe you get Dak out after a quarter, and you go with Romo for a quarter. Maybe you throw Mark Sanchez in to the Wolves at the end. But in the end, I want to see Tony Romo at least prepare himself somewhat, thrown into the Philly fire to get ready to be the emergency quarterback.
So you mean to tell me, as good as Jerry Jones said, Tony was looking on the scout team, that's not enough?
Not enough for me.
But he was getting ready to throw him into a meaningful game.
Yes, he was.
Because of what he saw on the scout team.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But let me ask you this. Do you want to see, let's just say for the sake of argument, Tony Romo plays a quarter or maybe even a half at the high end. Do you want to see him play really well or do you want to see him lay an egg?
I want to see him play really well because, I mean, you tell me. Right now, I think he could be zero threat to Dak's starting job, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
isn't that enough? Didn't he do
totally
enough
agree.
to
I
get
totally
13
agree.
and 2? Like, isn't it over now?
Yes. I think the thing is because most teams go into a game with 8 offensive linemen.
Yep.
Now, Tyron Smith is not playing. So now you're really down to 7. Maybe you pull up someone from the practice squad. Maybe they signed someone earlier this week. I don't know. But somebody's going to have to play. You can't sit down all your starting offensive linemen because nobody goes into a game with 10 offensive linemen because now you go in there with those 2 extra linemen, you got to pull players from somewhere else. Maybe it's cornerback, maybe it's wide receiver, maybe it's even the linebacker. So the starters are going to have to play a lot of this ball game. Now, I know they would love to get Martin. They would love to get Fredericks out of the ball game, Skip. I don't believe they're going to be able to do that because you only have limited bodies on the offensive line. I expect Dak to play at least a quarter. I would like to see him, I agree with you, I would like to see him go into the half because if you don't let him play, if he didn't play any, you're talking about 3 weeks. If you play him a quarter, that is some play time in a meaningful ball game, but I would like to see him go to a half. At least all the starters will be in there at least to the half. And this is the right decision because, look, I know Mark Sanchez, but you're not going to the Super Bowl if something happens to Dak and you're counting on Mark Sanchez.
I would agree.
So
you know what I told you early in the year? If Mark Sanchez is in, I'm out.
you were out. So I like this move. I like this move by the Cowboys. I don't really think there's anything that Tony Romo can show in a quarter or a half that would make them say, you know what, we really got to go with Tony in the playoffs. I think Dak has done enough at 13 and 2. He's answered every box that you had up there for him to check. He's checked them. And so moving forward, I don't see Tony Romo as any threat to Dak Prescott. And Dak has looked as good as any rookie quarterback that I can imagine, given the circumstances. Because when you look at the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger and what he did, they were a run team and a defense. They allowed Ben to throw very little. And so for him to be able...
Flacco also.
Joe Flacco. Russell Wilson was also a predominantly run team with beast mode and that great defense. They've put a little bit more on Dak's plate, and he's consumed it all. So I'm very pleased with this decision to get Tony into the ball game. Let him get his feet wet because contrary to what Jerry thinks, scout team is one thing, but you get to script what you want Tony to throw into. You get to script how it's going to play out. You get into a real game, you might think, but they might throw you a curveball. So they might give you a different front and a different coverage to what you're used to seeing on first, second, or third down. So I think this is a good move by the Cowboys to get Tony some game time action because it's been, like you said, 13 months since he's last played in a meaningful ball game. And I know the dress rehearsal, but 3 plays, but it's been 13 months, Thanksgiving of 2015, since Tony Romo has taken a snap in a meaningful ball game.